the mist, through the woods, through the darkness and the shadows. It's a nightmare, but it's one exciting ride. Say a prayer, then we're there.
Alright guys, so confession time. I completely forgot to do this review. I was going through my videos trying to do some editing and I was like, I have no footage for Mastiff. I have no clue how that slipped my mind. I mean, honestly, I do have a clue. My life has gotten so busy. But thank goodness that I do some things ahead of time. Otherwise, we would have been waiting a while for this. In any case, I hope I can do it justice. As I've said, I can probably do this Beka Cooper series in my sleep. However, I do enjoy reading them so that it's fresh. Like, my feelings, my emotions, my opinions are fresh. But here we go. Today's book review. It is the third in the Beka Cooper series by Tamora Pierce, and this is Mastiff. Now, if you've seen my other two on Terrier and Bloodhound, you know how much I love this series. And I really had no bad things to say about Terrier. Mastiff is even better than Terrier. If you are unfamiliar with Tamora Pierce, she's a fantasy writer. She started with her Alana series, and then she moved into her Mortal series. It's probably been 20 years since she started with Alana, and her ability to write has just gotten so much better. And so by the time that she got to Mastiff, her crafting abilities are impeccable. And so this one, like, I was having a really hard time deciding if I had a favorite in this series because they're all so well done. But I think Mastiff is where it's at, largely because you really have no clue who the bad guy is. I'm going to jump into a very brief synopsis, but before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of background. The main character of this trilogy is Beka Cooper, and she is a provost dog, which basically means in the realm of Tortal, she is police. In Terrier, we saw her going through her puppy year, which is basically training, and her trainees were Clary Goodwin and Matthias Tunstall. In Bloodhound, we saw a great deal more of Clary as Tunstall, had broken his legs and couldn't go on the hunt with them. However, at the end of Bloodhound, Clary had decided to go on desk duty. And this left Beka to be free to partner with Tunstall because Beka was not an easy partner. She just didn't put up with a lot of crap, and so this is how that problem was eventually solved, by putting Clary on desk duty and giving her to Tunstall. So now I think we're about 5 years on from that, and she and Tunstall are tasked with finding the kidnapped prince. They received this duty because Beka inherited a scent hound in Bloodhound, and that scent hound's name is Achu, and Achu is the best scent hound in the realm. So yes, they get this highly sensitive mission, and now they have to figure out who took him, where he's going, why this is happening. But along the way, somebody within their hunt party has turned traitor. The other people in their hunt party are Lady Sabine of McKay Hill, who is a lady knight. She is nobility, but she is also Tunstall's lady. However, there are issues there because basically class differences. And then there is Master Farmer Cape, who is a mage. And he's really interesting because he likes people to think that he's not a very good mage, that he's not very powerful, when in fact he's incredibly powerful. And then the last member of this hunt party is Pounce, and that is Beka's constellation cat, who in Bloodhound was removed because it would have made the whole thing too easy. But we do get to see him again this time around. So there we go. Prince Gareth is kidnapped. This ragtag bunch of people has to go find him, and what happens? We'll find out. I'm just gonna jump in with a massive spoiler. Like, what I think makes this book so great is you have no idea who is betraying the group, because from Beka's perspective, nobody in the group would be capable of that. Even though she doesn't know Master Farmer very well, he has proven to her to be trustworthy. And then she knows Lady Sabine, and she's like, Lady Sabine would never do something like that. She's too high of character. And then how could Tunstall ever betray us? Like, why would he do that? Well, who do you think was the traitor? It's Tunstall. And why? Because of what I said before. because he wanted to be worthy of Lady Sabine. Like, Beka at the end points out to him, she's like, Lady Sabine doesn't care. Like, she doesn't care that you're not nobility. She doesn't care that you don't have money. She loves you. And he's like, but I care. In the end of all of this, because the conspirators who kidnapped Prince Gareth were King Roger's younger brother, Prince Baird, and then some other nobility. And it was basically because, or it started out because Roger had been married previously. It wasn't a great marriage. He was a philanderer. She dies, and he marries Queen Jessamine, with whom he has Prince Gareth. And Queen Jessamine is like, you know what? I kind of want to be involved in the affairs of state. And so then they start cracking down on things. And part of this is they're going to tax mages, which I don't quite understand what all of that means. Basically, I think they're gonna have to pay for certain stuff, and they're like, oh, we're too high and mighty for that. We don't think so. So all this nobility who don't like the changes that are happening join forces with some really powerful mages, and they get together to kidnap Prince Gareth. And the end goal is obviously to kill the king and queen. And what they do is they put Prince Gareth under kind of like a blood spell, in which anything that happens to him will happen to his parents. And so it's really hard. Like, you can't heal the king and queen without healing Prince Gareth, and if you can't find Prince Gareth. But on top of that, Prince Gareth is essentially sold into slavery. So that's another overarching theme. And then at the end of the book, slavery is abolished, because if you know anything about the Alana series, by that point there is no slavery. And so now we kind of get to see a little background on why that happened. But back to Tunstall. When he and his hunt party had when they ended up at basically like the leaders of the conspiracy's castle, like, they don't know they're the leaders. Obviously they don't think they're innocent, but they don't really know to which extent these people are involved. Anyways, these leaders, they take him aside and they offer him something. They're like, look, if you help us out, we will give you titles, we'll give you land, we'll make you worthy of Lady Sabine. And Beka actually sees this. So this is something I think is so great, is Beka sees the point in which Tunstall turns against them. However, she knows he would never do it, because part of being a dog sometimes means taking bribes. And so she's like, all right, he's probably just messing with them, making them think that he'll do whatever they say. And he even says, he admits to the group that this is what the people offered him. Yet Beka, basically everybody in the group was like, he doesn't really mean it. Like, he lied to them. He's not lying to us. So it's just really great how Tamora Pierce puts everything out there. But because of characterization, and because of Beka being our narrator and kind of being not jaded, but like having an assumption of Tunstall's character, is like, no, there's no way. So we're all believing like nobody in this party could be the culprit, yet somebody has to be. So who is it? So anyways, yeah, so he's just like, I wanted to be worthy of her. Beka is like, there was no reason for this. She didn't want any of that. And then in the end, Tunstall actually dies. He and Beka, like, they make it basically to the end of the line. They find Prince Gareth. They leave with him. And then Tunstall, what he's gonna do is kind of stage a death and say it was an accident. And then, he and the conspirators would go on their merry way, but Beka and him get into a skirmish, and he ends up dying. Like, so as I mentioned in Bloodhound, he was not part of that hunt because he'd broken his legs, and so ever since then they just troubled him. So she basically re-breaks them, and in the night he kind of just succumbs. I don't quite know what he really dies from. Maybe he just realizes it's the end, and so he gives up, and somehow that plus his injuries sends him to the grave. Another spoiler, Beka and Farmer fall in love, and they're about to get married, and So that was one thing that was really interesting and is actually a con of Mastiff. While it is my favorite, I did find some things that didn't quite sit well with me. And one of them, I guess one and a half. So in the beginning of this book, we see Beka mourning the death of her fiance named Holborn. And so, or Holborn, I don't really know how you're supposed to pronounce it, the narrator, which, side note, these audiobooks are narrated so well. Narrator pronounces it Holborn, but it's spelled with two O's, Holborn. So if I just say it wrong or I say it differently, forgive me. So Holborn had died in the line of duty. But what we learn is that they didn't really get along very well. And Beka, you get the sense that she didn't really want to get married, but for some reason she was going to go through with it anyways. And so on that note, I wondered, did we really need it? This feeling of melancholy or of sadness and loss does follow us or follow Beka throughout the book. You know, people attribute some of her behaviors to the fact that she just lost a loved one, where she rebuts, like, I actually should be sad, but I'm not. Like, my behavior is related to something completely different. And so I was just like, did we really need it? In a way, it kind of establishes a little bit more her work ethic, because his mother kind of blames Beka for his death because he wanted to live up to her reputation. He wanted to, I guess, prove himself as equal to her, and so he rushed into a situation that he probably should have been smarter about, and that's why he dies. So maybe that's kind of why, or maybe we're just supposed to get like another facet of Beka's personality, or I don't really know. I thought it was unnecessary. Like, I don't know why we had to open up with that. I think we could have opened up a little bit later in the book. Especially because, yeah, like, there were bits and pieces of, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, are you still sad about Holborn, whatever. And then, like, with Farmer Cape and their burgeoning relationship, or not relationship, romance, feelings, whatever you want to call it, she's kind of like, you know, should I let him know that I just lost someone? Or more to the point, should I let him know that I don't really care that I lost somebody? But, so yeah, that was really the point that I had the most issues with in this book, was Holborn, because I thought he has not been mentioned in any book. Like, their romance started somewhere between Bloodhound and Mastiff, and it didn't, considering how meticulous Pierce is, it just doesn't play enough of a part in the book for me to think she really needed to include it. But as far as Cape and Beka, that one, I really liked how it developed, because she is not one to trust easily. She is not one who you can impress easily. And so, you know, at first she thinks he's a real idiot, which like, part of him that I don't really understand. I like that he isn't an idiot, but he makes people think he's an idiot. But at the same time, I'm like, why is he making certain people think he's an idiot? Like, yes, if he comes up against another mage, somebody he knows, somebody he does not respect, like, yeah, I get it. Don't let this other mage know that you're capable far beyond what this other person thinks you're capable of. But with Beka and her group, like, I guess in the beginning, all right, yes, like, make them think that you're incapable because you don't know them. But sometimes I felt like this simpleton act, this looby act as they refer to it, went a little overboard. But anyways, he gains Beka's trust, and they just form a bond. You know, she likes him, she thinks he's a great guy, and then, you know, she eventually starts to make little comments, like, about his appearance, you know, things that let us know that she's noticing him in some other way. And so I really liked how it wasn't like Pierce was saying, we need to have a romance, this needs to be a focus, but it was more of, well, you know, Beka's evolving in certain ways, and she's attracted to this guy. Still not a huge point in the novel, but it is something to give us a little smile, to be a little heartwarming. And then at the end, when they're in that final destination and they're locked up in the dungeons, and you know, they're like, oh, I love you, I want to get married. And I really don't have a problem with that either. I do feel like it was a little sudden in that we get bits and pieces of Beka's feelings or thoughts, and then all of a sudden there's this really deep emotional connection, or like she just really she cares about him far more than we would ever know. And I guess maybe that is life, where sometimes we begin to like our friends more than we understand ourselves. Yeah, so that's like the half. So when it comes to the romance, the one of the 1.5 that really bothered me wasn't actually Beka and Farmer Cave. It was more Beka and Holburn, and really the whole necessity for their little love story. And then just the half was like, sometimes it did feel like their romance came not out of nowhere, but it just happened too fast. It went from like 0, and then we're at 20, and then we're at 100. So, but that's nitpicky. That's me. That is me having read this book so many times that I can finally start to be nitpicky. If I do have one final complaint, it would be that Prince Gareth, who is about 4, feels a bit older than 4. Like, he's a bit more mature than the average 4-year-old. I would say he feels more like an 8 or a 10-year-old. Maybe it's his experience with the slave ring. Maybe it's because he's royal and they are more articulate. Like, maybe they have just more mature thoughts in their heads. I don't really know. I don't think that the narration, as much as I loved this audiobook, I don't think the narration helped, because he actually sounded really young, yet his words and thoughts were really old, really mature. And so it was a really uncomfortable juxtaposition for me. I don't know. Do any of you keep up with the monarchy in England? Like, have you ever heard those kids talk? Maybe that is something that royals are capable of, just because they're in certain situations. I just, when we finally got to him, I mean, I was fine. But then he started talking about like his family and about slavery and about the future and about like basically getting away. And I just didn't feel like it was a 4-year-old. Yes, he would be afraid. Maybe he would be suspicious. But just, I think should have aged him up so that his... I don't know what I'm trying to say. That we should have either aged him up so that his age could match his mentality, or aged his mentality down so that he felt like a typical 4-year-old, or not even a typical 4-year-old, that he just felt more like a 4-year-old. I mean, even Beka calls him a little old man in a 4-year-old's body, if that gives you any indication. It's almost like Tamora Pierce knew that she was stretching this a little too far. But let's get on to the good stuff. I know I've mentioned this a lot, but I think it's just so important. Like, this is what makes this Beka Cooper series so successful, is the plotting, is the pacing, is Tamora Pierce's ability to craft and story tell. Because fantasy, for me, it's not something that I ever thought was my cup of tea. I didn't really see myself as a fantasy lover, but because of Tamora Pierce, I see that I really enjoy this mythical, magical, unrealistic type of storytelling. And it's because she mixes so well the realistic with the unrealistic, and then her plots just, they're so intricate and they're so interesting. In this book, basically nothing goes right. From the very beginning, nothing goes right. Yet at the same time, I'm okay with that, because she makes enough go right. Gives us enough forward momentum. Like, she allows Beka to get enough information or clues or whatever in order for them to keep moving forward. They just tend to run into a ton of obstacles. And so I love that, because sometimes I get really irritated. What was a book? There was a book where I felt like one of the characters, it was just too easy for them. And I'm like, that makes it really hard for me to connect with, or for me to relate to, for me to care about, because I'm like, characters have to have flaws. But at the same time, if they're too flawed, if the book is too flawed, I'm just like, can we please have a moment to breathe? Like, have you ever read a book where things happened so much, so fast, that you didn't have time to come down and to process it? But what she does in Mastiff is, from the very beginning, we start with a scene that I don't really care for, or with people with a character that I don't really care about, which is Holborn. So we start with a tragedy in Beka's life, interrupted in the middle of the night by basically someone coming to say, look, we have a mission for you. And then we get no information about this. And then we start seeing the devastation of what they're about to encounter. And then we find out, oh, it's Prince Gareth. He has been kidnapped. And so we meet the king and queen, who, like, I guess another small irritation for me with Pierce's writing is her adults are always so good. Like, we have our villains, and then we have our good guys, and there's not a whole lot of in between. There's like, they're villainous because they're a villain, and they're a good guy because they're a good guy. And so we meet the king and queen, and the assumption is they're going to be high and mighty, hoity-toity, they're going to be standoffish, but they're not. They're so humane, or human, and relatable, and they just care about their kids so much. And I'm just like, I mean, could one of our kings and queens just be super greedy? Why do they all have to be so good? Anyways, we meet the king and queen, we go and we discover the sunken ships, and we find out that all the raiding party had been, like, magically bound to these ships and then drowned. And so then we go and it just starts raining, and Beka's like, I can't do anything if there's no scent. If the rain washes away the scent, then Achu cannot do anything. And so we just time and again, but then, you know, Farmer Cape comes through with his magic, and he's able to do things to help them out, or just little things. So I really love her pacing. So let me talk about, sorry about that. Let me talk about Achu for a minute, because I am not a dog person, and normally when I see a dog in a book, I'm just like, I just don't understand. It's like, why do we have to dress up our dogs and carry them around in handbags and treat them like people when they're dogs? I know all of you dog lovers are going to be like, you just don't understand. And I really don't. It's not part of my personality. But I really enjoyed Achu. There were times when I was like, okay, I've had enough of the dog. Let's move on. Because again, sometimes she's a little too perfect. But I thought it was so great how Pierce kind of humanized Achu. So yeah, we know she's a dog, but she and Beka are able to communicate in such a way that you feel like she's a person, but it's still done in a dog way. I know none of that probably makes sense, but for the fact that I like Achu, I think says a lot about Pierce's ability to write, especially because Achu, well, I was going to say she's a minor character, but she's really not. In Bloodhound, she was really important. In Mastiff, she's really important. Kudos to you, Tamora Pierce, for making me like a fictional dog, okay? Hard enough to make me like a real dog, and you will probably never see any dogs in my own writing just because I feel like they're so unnecessary. But yeah, there we go. That was a small success that I felt needed to be pointed out. So, if you have seen my other two reviews, if you've read anything by Tamora Pierce, you know that magic is integral to her writing. But with this Beka Cooper series, Beka Cooper doesn't actually have magic. It's arguable that she has a form of wild magic like Dane does in the Immortals series, or the Wolfspeaker series. I call it Wolfspeaker, but I think the technical name is the Immortals. In any case, so Dane doesn't have, like, I can cast spells magic. She has a tie to nature, to animals and things like that. And so in a sense, I guess you could say that what Beka Cooper has is wild magic, because she can talk to dust spinners. She can hear the dead who ride pigeonback. It's not really fully explained, but in terms of magic, it is not prevalent in the Beka Cooper series, just because she does not have magic, and anybody who does have magic is generally on the outskirts. You know, none of the dogs have magic. It's more like we have a kennel mage to take care of our broken bones. But in Mastiff, we have Farmer Cape, who I've mentioned is extremely powerful, but he doesn't like people to know it. And I thought that was so ingenious. I loved how Pierce played that off, because, and I guess a little irritant of mine is that he is far more powerful than he lets on. Like, even when we realize how powerful he is, he continues to say, I'm not that powerful. And I'm like, dude, you sew magic with thread. Like, I don't really even understand how a lot of his magic works. Like, maybe he himself is not powerful, but because he's able to not steal other people's magic, but according to this book, traces of magic can be left behind, and he sort of gleans those extra traces, and then he sews them basically onto a ribbon, or embroiders them onto a ribbon, and then he can use them. So maybe his own magic isn't that powerful, and it's more so the magic that he gets along the way that enables him to do what he does. Personally, I think it's just downplayed a little too much, and while I love a good humble character, too much humbleness is annoying. But I think it's really cool, like, what the explanation we're giving is he is looked down upon by his fellow mages because he did not go to Carthag and to the University of Carthag. He's not a black robe. Like, he doesn't have the conventional training. What he did was, I guess when he was a kid, he showed signs of magic. And then his mother, who I think she was a seamstress of some sort, she would basically, like, send him off to help other people in exchange for magic training. And so that's how he learned everything he could do. So it's very an unconventional education, but he learned a ton. And so I really enjoyed seeing his unconventional bits of magic. I do wish that we could have gotten, because it's so unconventional, I wish we could have gotten more of an explanation as to how it all works. But in any case, I enjoyed seeing what he could do. For instance, they're following the slave wagon, and along the way, they find the dead bodies of some slaves. And Farmer Cape is able to basically raise them from the dead. And then one of the mages, like, they don't actually know there's two mages until around this point. And then, so the mage they do know about, she, like, talks to him through one of the dead bodies, and he does magic to, like, get rid of her. And so he's able to do magic like that. But then there's also an instance where the mage, because she just likes to inflict pain on others, had poisoned a river. And so then what Farmer Cape does is he is somehow able to bind that magic back to her so that it would slowly kill her. Again, this is one of those things that I really should have a better grasp on, considering how many times I've read this book, but please forgive me. Something about how she would never notice it if she used small magic, but this mage likes to use big magic. So inevitably, if she tried to use big magic, this binding spell would come back to bite her. Yeah, that's as good of an explanation as I can give you right now, but it just goes to show you his capabilities. And so on just some level, I wish we could have gotten more about it, because he's kind of mysterious in his mageness. Although I have to say, one of the grossest parts of this novel, as I told you, he can embroider magic into thread. And so there was a point in the novel where they are stopped at a tavern, and then the tavern is set on fire. And essentially this fire was set to destroy his packs, because the opposition knows how much power he carries with him. It turns out that whatever he had in those packs is nothing compared to like the ball of magic that he has swallowed. Like, he continues to keep inside his body. And so then when he and Beka are in the dungeons at the end, and he's like, excuse me for a minute, I gotta push out this ball of magic. I was like, oh gosh, like, I mean, it's not really explicit, but for me, you know, there are just certain things that I don't really want to read about, and him pooping out a ball of magic is kind of at my limit. Anyways, yeah, and you know, even then he does this really neat magic where he makes the guards think that they are now Farmer and Beka, and that Farmer and Beka are the guards, and they're able to escape that way. So it's just really cool what he's capable of. And that's when I do wish that this trilogy had more magic, because we're able to get more of Pierce's creativity. I'm a little sad that it does end here, because the books are all predicated on Beka's journal keeping. And so at the end of Mastiff, she's like, I'm not going to keep any more journals. There's really no point. The journals were for kind of her puppy training to help her remember things. And I guess at this point, she's like, I don't need to do that anymore. I'm good. So I am sad that we don't get to see more of Beka, but there's Alana to look forward to. There's all the other books after Alana to look forward to. Eventually, we will get more of Numair. If you know anything about this whole world of Tortall in the Immortal series, that main character Dane falls in love with a mage named Numair, and then Pierce decides to write kind of the Numair Chronicles so that we see where he came from, because he is an exceptionally powerful mage. I was not super impressed by the first Numair book. It felt like too much in too little bit of time. But we'll see what happens with the next one. I don't really know what the status is. I think maybe COVID could have delayed things, or maybe Pierce just takes her time. God knows, a lot of writers do. You know, let's get the neon arrows pointing right here. Okay. But I hope you've enjoyed this review. I think I could have done it way better. You know, not only did I forget to record the review, but I threw away my notes. So I did the best I could with what I had. The upside is that this one was probably super short. If you have any questions, if you have any opinions, as long as they're kind, let's be constructive. Let me know if there's anything else that you want me to review that might be in this realm. I do plan on doing Alana. I do plan on doing the Immortals. I do plan on doing Trickster's Choice. I don't plan on doing the Circle of Magic. Didn't really interest me. I will probably do Numair. But yeah, if there's anything else that's related to kind of what Tamora Pierce does, let me know and I'll read it and I'll talk about it. Until then, see ya!